Two women wake up in the same city on the same Monday. One earns more, she works longer hours, answers more emails, says yes to every extra shift, and she is still drowning in overdue notices. The other earns less, works fewer hours, and has more than $1 million sitting in an account she barely checks. Same stores, same rising prices, two completely different lives. One is exhausted and falling behind. The other is calm and almost free. The gap between them is not luck, and it is barely about income. It comes down to 10 habits. So how does the woman earning less end up with so much more? That is the real question, and the answer is going to feel almost insulting once you see it, because it is not about working harder. The exhausted woman is already working harder than almost everyone she knows. She is not lazy, she is not reckless, and she does not have some secret expense quietly bleeding her dry. She is simply running a life built on effort, where every extra dollar has to be earned all over again next month. The calm woman built something completely different. She built a set of systems that move money in the right direction, whether she feels motivated on any given day or not. Her wealth does not depend on her energy. That is the entire trick, and it is the thread running through all 10 of these habits. Understand the trap the exhausted woman is caught in, because it is a specific one. She has been taught that money comes from effort, so when she wants more of it, she reaches for more hours. She trades her time directly for dollars, and the moment she stops trading, the dollars stop arriving. There is a hard ceiling on that arrangement because there are only so many hours in a week and only so many shifts a body can survive. The calm woman broke out of that trap by building a second worker that never sleeps, never burns out, and never asks for a day off. Her money earns money. And once your money starts working alongside you, the ceiling that limited the woman trading only her hours simply disappears. That is the quiet line dividing these two lives. And every habit below is really just a different way of putting more workers on the second team. There is a reason this pattern shows up so often among women in particular. When Fidelity studied more than 5 million accounts over a full decade, women investors outperformed men by about 0.4% every single year. And they traded roughly 27% less often while doing it. Less trading, more patience, steadier results. That may sound like a small edge, but compounded across 30 or 40 years, it becomes enormous. And here is what raises the stakes even higher. Women in the United States still earn somewhere around 80 cents for every dollar a man earns. And they tend to live several years longer. Less money coming in, more years to fund on the way out. That combination means the margin for error is thinner for women than almost anyone wants to admit, which is exactly why these habits carry so much weight. The reassuring part is that not one of them requires a big salary, a finance degree, or perfect timing. Every single habit can be copied starting this week. Let me walk you through all 10, one at a time. Habit number 1. They pay themselves first, and they make it automatic before the money ever has a chance to disappear. Meet a Daisy. She is a nurse who spent years telling herself she would invest whatever was left at the end of the month. For 2 straight years, nothing was ever left. The month always found somewhere else to put her money. A car repair, a birthday, a slightly bigger grocery run, and her investing account stayed empty while her paychecks kept landing and vanishing. So she changed exactly one thing. She set up an automatic transfer that fires the same morning her paycheck hits her account, moving a fixed amount straight into her investments before she can see it, touch it, or talk herself out of it. Within a single year, she was investing consistently for the first time in her life, and she never once had to summon the willpower to do it by hand. This is the quiet difference between a goal and a system. A goal depends on you being disciplined on your worst, most tired, most stressed day, which is exactly the day discipline tends to collapse. A A system removes that day from the equation entirely. Disciplined women almost never rely on remembering to invest, because remembering is fragile and life is loud. They automate the decision one time, and then the decision keeps making itself in the background forever. Studies consistently show that women save at a slightly higher rate than men, and automation is a huge part of why it actually sticks instead of staying a nice intention. Think about that for a second. The single most reliable wealth habit on this entire list only asks you to be disciplined once on the afternoon you set it up. After that, the machine carries the discipline, so you do not have to. The overworked earner is still trying to find leftover money at the end of every month. The disciplined woman took her share off the top before the month even started. And notice how small the starting number can be. Adeze did not begin with some heroic amount that required her to eat rice for a year. She began with what felt almost trivial, a slice of each paycheck she genuinely would not miss, and she let the habit matter more than the size of it. The amount can grow later, every time she gets a raise or clears a debt, and it usually does. What could never grow was a habit that did not exist yet. So she built the pipe first and worried about the volume flowing through it second. If you take only one thing from this entire list, let it be the order of those two steps, because almost everyone gets it backwards. They wait until they can invest a meaningful amount, and while they wait, the years that make investing meaningful quietly slip past them. Habit number 2. They grab every dollar of the employer match before they chase anything else. Priscilla works in logistics, and her company offers to match part of whatever she puts into her 401k. For years, she ignored it completely because retirement felt like a problem belonging to some distant future version of herself. Then, a coworker explained what she was actually turning down every payday. Her employer was offering her free money, a guaranteed 100% return on the portion they matched, and she was strolling right past it. In 2026, an employee can put up to $24,500 into a 401k, but you do not need to come anywhere close to that ceiling to win here. You only need to contribute enough to capture the full match your company offers. Run the actual math and it stops being abstract in a hurry. Picture a $5,000 yearly match invested and left alone for 30 years at a reasonable market return. That grows to somewhere close to $500,000. Not out of your salary, out of the money your employer was trying to hand you for free the entire time. Leaving that match unclaimed is the financial equivalent of being offered a raise and answering, "No thank you. I would rather not." Nobody would ever say that out loud in a meeting, and yet it happens silently in break rooms across the country every 2 weeks. The woman who quietly builds wealth treats that match as the very first bill she pays, ahead of rent, ahead of everything else, because it is the only place on earth where she gets an instant, guaranteed double on her money the moment it lands. And somehow it gets better, because that same doubled money then compounds for decades on top of the gift. Habit number 3. They buy the entire market and then they leave it completely alone. Rhonda is not a stock picker, and she is proud of it. She could not tell you which company is about to take off next quarter, and she has absolutely zero interest in trying to guess. What she does instead is almost boring. She buys a simple, low-cost index fund that owns a slice of the 500 largest companies in America, the group tracked by the S&P 500. Over the last 100 years, that index has returned an average of about 10% a year with dividends reinvested. Not smoothly, and that part matters enormously. Some years it drops hard, and a few of those drops are terrifying while they happen. But held across decades through crashes and recoveries and every panic in between, that long-term average has stayed remarkably durable. Now here is the detail that separates the disciplined from the merely busy. A study by JP Morgan found that the average investor earned only about 2.9% a year over a long stretch, while the market itself did far, far better than that. Read that again slowly. The market handed out something close to 10%, and the typical person walked away with less than a third of it. How? By buying when they felt excited and selling when they felt scared, over and over, quietly hemorrhaging their own returns through sheer nervous energy. This is precisely where women tend to shine. Trading 27% less often is not timidity, and it is not a lack of confidence. It is the whole strategy wearing a disguise. The wealth in an index fund does not come from being clever or fast. It comes from being genuinely still while everyone around you loses their nerve. Rhonda calls checking her account too often the fastest way to talk yourself into a mistake, so she mostly does not look. Her portfolio grows because she leaves it the way you leave a cake in the oven. Opening the door every 5 minutes only ruins it. There is a second reason Rhonda favors a plain index fund over anything fancier, and it comes down to fees. A lot of actively managed funds and advisors quietly skim a % or 2 of your money every year for the privilege of trying to beat the market, and the uncomfortable truth is that the large majority of them fail to beat it over the long run anyway, so you pay more to earn less. A broad index fund often costs a tiny fraction of that, sometimes only a few dollars a year for every $10,000 invested. That may sound like a rounding error, but run it across 4 decades and the difference between a cheap fund and an expensive one can quietly swallow 6 figures of your future wealth. Disciplined women tend to obsess over that number precisely because it is the one variable in investing they can actually control. You cannot control the market. You can absolutely control how much of your return you hand to someone else on the way through. Habit number 4. They start now, and they let time carry the weight instead of their paycheck. Talia started investing $300 a month at 25 years old on a modest salary, feeling like it was almost too small to matter. Her friend, who actually earned more, kept meaning to start and finally began the very same $300 a month at 35, just 10 years apart, same amount, same market. By the time both women reach 65, the numbers are not close, and they are not even living in the same universe. Talia, the one who started at 25, ends up with close to $800,000. Her friend, who waited a single decade, ends up with less than half of that. Nothing separated them except time. Let me show you exactly why, because it is almost hard to believe when you first see it. Over those 40 years, Talia only put in about $144,000 of her own money. The market manufactured the other $600,000 and then some. That extra money was never earned at a job, never negotiated in a raise, never clocked in for. It was created by time, by returns stacking on top of previous returns year after year after year in a snowball that gets heavier the longer it rolls. This is the quiet engine that disciplined women trust more than any promotion. A higher income can absolutely help you contribute more, and that is real. But nothing on earth replaces the years you hand your money to grow, and those years are the one resource you can never buy back later. The most valuable thing the calm woman in our opening ever did was not landing a big salary. It was starting long before she felt ready, when the amount felt almost embarrassingly small. Here is the part that surprises people most. Talia did not need the market to be calm for this to work. Over her 40 years, the market crashed more than once, sometimes brutally, and each time her steady $300 a month quietly kept buying while everyone else froze. When prices fell, her fixed contribution simply scooped up more shares at a discount, and those cheap shares bought during the scary years turned into some of her biggest gains during the recoveries that followed. That is the hidden gift of investing the same amount on a schedule, no matter what the headlines are screaming. The crashes that terrify most people become sales for the woman who never stops buying. She did not have to be brave, and she did not have to guess the bottom. She only had to keep the automatic transfer running while others were busy panicking, and time rewarded her precisely for the discipline of not reacting. Habit number 5. They keep a cash cushion in a high-yield account, so they never have to sell in a panic. Josephine keeps 3 to 6 months of expenses parked in a separate savings account she treats as genuinely untouchable. It is not there to grow rich, and she does not expect it to. It is there for one job only, to make sure she is never a forced seller. When her car transmission died last winter, she did not reach for a credit card charging 22% interest, and she did not sell a single share of anything she owned. She simply moved the cash, fixed the car, and got on with her week. And here is the part almost everyone overlooks. That cushion is not just protection against emergencies. It is the exact thing that lets her investments stay invested through a market crash, because she is never desperate enough to cash them out at the worst possible moment. The account she keeps it in matters just as much as having it. As of the middle of 2026, the best high-yield savings accounts are paying somewhere around 4%, while the national average savings account pays a genuinely laughable 0.38%. On an emergency fund of $25,000, that gap alone is worth about $900 a year, earned for doing absolutely nothing except keeping the money in the right kind of account. The best part is that these accounts are federally insured up to $250,000 per bank, so there is no added risk anywhere in the trade. Same cash, same safety, roughly 10 times the interest. The disciplined woman is not chasing some exotic yield here or taking a gamble. She is simply refusing to let a big bank quietly keep interest that should be landing in her pocket. You would think everyone would move their savings the moment they learn this. Most never bother, and the banks are counting on exactly that. Josephine is also careful about where this money does not go. She keeps her emergency fund out of the stock market entirely, even though the market offers better long-term returns, because the entire point of this money is that it has to be there on the worst possible day. Emergencies have a cruel habit of arriving exactly when the market happens to be down, and selling investments at a loss to cover a surprise is the single trap the cushion exists to prevent. So the cushion stays boring and liquid on purpose. Her growth money and her safety money live in two completely different worlds, and she never blurs the line between them. That clarity is the reason a bad month never spirals into a financial crisis for her, the way it so often does for someone forced to raid their investments the moment life goes sideways. Habit number 6. They quietly max out the accounts that are basically legal tax loopholes. Marguerite treats the tax code like a coupon book almost nobody bothers to open. Her favorite page is the Roth Individual Retirement Account. In 2026, she can put in up to $7,500, and here is the magic of it: every dollar that money earns for the rest of her life comes out completely tax-free in retirement. Max that account out for 30 years and it can quietly grow past $700,000, with the tax office owing zero claim on a single dollar of the gains. Then there is her health savings account, which is the only account in America that hands you 3 separate tax breaks at once. The money goes in tax-free, it grows tax-free, and it comes back out tax-free when it is used for medical costs. In 2026, the limit is $4,400 for an individual and $8,750 for a family. And when it is invested, rather than spent each year, it can build past $400,000 across a working career. None of this requires a special connection or an advisor in an expensive suit. It requires knowing these accounts exist and then actually using them on purpose, which is a bar far lower than it sounds. That really is the whole secret. While the overworked earner hands the tax office more than they legally owe year after year without ever noticing, the disciplined woman routes those very same dollars through accounts designed to let her keep the growth. She is not earning more than her exhausted counterpart. She is simply keeping more of what she already earns, and stretched across a lifetime, that single difference can quietly add up to the price of a house. That is the kind of number that makes accountants a little emotional. Marguerite also follows a simple order that keeps her from ever feeling paralyzed by choice. First, she contributes just enough to her 401k to capture the full employer match, because nothing beats free money. Next, she funnels everything she can into the Roth account and the health savings account, where the growth escapes taxes entirely. Only after those are handled does she circle back and add more to the 401k if she still has room to invest. Match first, then the tax-free accounts, then everything else. She does not agonize over which account is theoretically optimal down to the last dollar, because the difference between a good plan followed for 30 years and a perfect plan never started is not close. A disciplined woman would rather run a simple system flawlessly than admire a complicated one she never quite gets around to using. If any of this is landing for you, take 1 second and subscribe, because this channel breaks down the quiet money moves that actually build wealth, one habit at a time, every single week. All right, here is where these habits get a little uncomfortable, because the next several are less about what you add and more about what you have the discipline to refuse. Habit number 7. They refuse to inflate their lifestyle every single time their income goes up. Ingrid got a solid raise about 3 years ago and then did something that felt almost aggressively boring. She kept living exactly the way she had the month before the raise arrived. The nicer apartment, the upgraded car, the reflexive extra dinners out, she quietly skipped all of it and sent the entire raise straight into her investments instead. Her coworkers, who landed similar raises around the same time, absorbed theirs into a slightly more expensive life within about a month, and then found themselves genuinely confused about why they still felt broke on a noticeably bigger paycheck. That trap has a name, and once you can see it, you see it everywhere. It is lifestyle creep, and it is the single biggest reason so many high earners live paycheck to paycheck while quietly believing they should feel rich by now. The cost of that creep is staggering the moment you actually measure it in real numbers. Take a $500 a month raise, the kind that feels almost too small to bother investing. Absorb it into a fancier lifestyle, and in 25 years, you are left with a nicer memory and nothing on the balance sheet. Invest that same $500 a month, and it grows past $400,000. That is the true price tag hiding inside every upgrade that felt harmless in the moment. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. Disciplined women decide what enough actually looks like before the money ever arrives, so the money never gets the chance to quietly redefine it for them. They let their income rise while their spending stays flat, and the ever-widening gap between those two lines is precisely where the wealth pools up. The sneaky thing about lifestyle creep is that it always arrives dressed as something you earned. You worked hard, so you deserve the nicer car. You survived a brutal quarter, so you deserve the upgrade. Every single expense feels justified in the moment, and honestly, most of them are not unreasonable on their own. The danger is never the one purchase. It is the quiet resetting of what normal costs, one reasonable decision at a time, until a life that used to fit comfortably inside your old paycheck now demands every dollar of your new one. Ingrid still rewards herself, by the way. She is not living like a monk. The difference is that she rewards herself on purpose, with a set amount she decided on in advance, rather than letting each raise silently raise the floor beneath her feet. She gets to enjoy the money and keep the wealth, because she chose the number instead of letting the number choose her. Habit number 8. They never let cash sit still because they know inflation is eating it alive in silence. Delphine grew up watching her grandmother keep her entire life savings in a plain checking account, proud that it was safe from the stock market. It was never actually safe. It was shrinking in slow motion the whole time, with inflation running around 3.3% in early 2026, and the average savings account paying that miserable 0.38%, money left sitting in the wrong place loses real purchasing power every single year without one number on the statement ever appearing to drop. It feels safe precisely because the loss is invisible, and that invisibility is exactly what makes it so dangerous. You cannot flinch at a loss you never see. So the disciplined woman treats idle cash as a slow leak she is responsible for plugging. Her emergency fund earns a real return in a high-yield account rather than rotting in a checking account. Everything beyond that, the money she knows she will not need for many years, goes to work in the market where it has a genuine chance to outrun inflation over time. She is not being reckless, and she is not gambling with money she needs next month. She is refusing to let her savings quietly get poorer while pretending to sit still and protected. There is an entire category of losing money that looks exactly like doing nothing at all, and she has trained her eye to spot it where other people see only caution. Safety that guarantees you lose ground is not really safety. It is just a slower kind of falling behind. Put a real number on it and the leak becomes impossible to ignore. Say Delphine's grandmother kept $50,000 in that checking account for a decade. With inflation grinding away at roughly 3% a year, that same $50,000 would buy noticeably less by the end. Its real value quietly bleeding down toward the high 30s in today's purchasing power, even though the balance on the statement never moved a cent. She lost more than $10,000 of buying power without a single alarming transaction ever appearing. That is the cruelty of inflation. It never sends a notice, it never triggers a fee, and it never shows up as a withdrawal. It just makes tomorrow's dollar quietly worth less than today's while you feel responsible for keeping the money still. The disciplined woman respects that force enough to make sure her long-term money is always growing faster than prices are climbing, because standing still in an economy that never does is the same as walking backward. Habit number 9. They plan on purpose for a longer life and much bigger bills waiting at the end of it. Cassandra does the one thing most people work very hard to avoid. She looks the hard numbers dead in the eye and refuses to blink. Women in the United States tend to live several years longer than men, which sounds like a pure gift until you realize it also means several more years to fund and a far higher chance of navigating those years alone. On top of that, one widely cited estimate puts the healthcare costs a single woman will face in retirement at around $165,000. And the starting line for many is brutal. The median retirement savings for women sits near $50,000 compared to roughly $157,000 for men. Less saved on average and considerably more life left to pay for. So Cassandra deliberately builds a bigger cushion than she thinks she will need, and she never once apologizes for it. She front-loads her investing hard during her strongest earning years while time is still on her side. She takes the full employer match, maxes her tax-advantaged accounts, and keeps her everyday costs low, all of it planned around those extra decades rather than in spite of them. This is not fear driving her. It is respect for reality. The women who reach retirement genuinely comfortable are almost never the ones who assumed everything would somehow work out on its own. They are the ones who ran the uncomfortable math early, did not flinch at the answer, and then built themselves a margin wide enough to absorb a life that lasts longer than the average plan ever bothers to account for. Planning for 85 instead of hoping to be gone by 75 is not pessimism. It is how you avoid running out of money while you are still very much alive to need it. Cassandra also thinks carefully about when she will turn on Social Security, because that single decision quietly shapes decades of her retirement. She knows that claiming the moment she is eligible locks in a permanently smaller monthly check while holding off for a few years grows that check substantially for the rest of her life. For a woman who expects to live into her late 80s or beyond, waiting can mean tens of thousands of extra dollars collected over the long haul. And it works like insurance against the very real risk of outliving her savings. This is exactly the kind of unglamorous decision the exhausted earner never has the space to think about, because she is too busy surviving this month to plan for a decade she cannot yet see. Cassandra makes the boring choice on purpose, early, while she still has options, and her future self inherits the calm that comes from it. Habit number 10. They keep their wealth boring, quiet, and almost completely invisible. Rosalind could easily afford a far flashier life than the one she actually lives, and that restraint is the entire point. Her car is paid off and gloriously unremarkable. Her wardrobe is simple and repeats without shame. Nothing about the way she presents to the world would tell you she is sitting close to financial freedom, and she likes it precisely that way. Real wealth, the kind that actually buys freedom rather than the appearance of it, tends to be silent. It does not show up as a logo on a bag or a fresh lease in the driveway. It shows up as options, as unhurried calm, as the quiet power to walk away from a bad job or a bad month without the floor dropping out beneath you. The people hustling hardest to look rich are very often the ones carrying the least underneath, because every dollar spent performing wealth is a dollar that can never quietly grow into the real thing. There is a strange freedom in letting go of the performance entirely. When Rosalind stopped caring whether her car or her handbag signaled anything to anyone, an enormous amount of financial pressure simply evaporated. She was no longer paying a monthly tax to look a certain way for people who were not thinking about her nearly as much as she once assumed. That saved money did not disappear into a flashier life. It flowed straight into the accounts, quietly compounding in the background. The wealthiest people in many neighborhoods are not the ones in the biggest houses with the newest cars in the driveway. They are frequently the ones in the modest home who paid it off years ago and drive something sensible while their investments do the impressive part out of sight. Visible spending and actual wealth are often running in opposite directions, and the disciplined woman figured that out early. She decided she would rather be rich than merely look it, and she never once confused the two. Which brings us right back around to the two women we started with. The exhausted one was never failing because she earned too little to get ahead. She was failing because her money had no system behind it, no automation moving it, no cushion protecting it, and no time left to let it grow. The calm one was not winning on luck or some secret nobody else could access. She was quietly running these same 10 habits so consistently that wealth stopped being a hope and turned into something much closer to arithmetic. The investing was automated, and every dollar of the match was claimed. She bought the whole market and then refused to touch it. Her cash sat guarded in the right account while her early start did the heavy lifting, and her money moved through the accounts that shield it from taxes. Her income climbed for years while her spending held perfectly flat. And through all of it, kept working, kept low, planned around a long life. She never once needed a single person to know how well she was actually doing. Now, if all of this still feels like an enormous amount to take on at once, there is one gentle place to begin that asks almost nothing of you and cannot go wrong. Long before the stock market, before any of the growth accounts we just covered, a lot of women who feel genuinely overwhelmed choose to start with the single calmest instrument in the entire country, a savings bond backed directly by the United States Treasury. Right now, in 2026, a Series 1 savings bond is paying around 4.25%. It automatically adjusts to keep pace with inflation, and it simply cannot lose a dollar of its value. You can put in up to $10,000 a year, and what you get in return is a solid, unshakable floor sitting underneath everything else you go on to build. For anyone who feels nervous about starting a retirement journey at all, that floor tends to be the most reassuring first step there is, which is exactly why understanding how bonds truly work is the natural next thing worth learning. It is the quiet foundation the other 10 habits get to stand on. That full breakdown is ready and waiting for you the moment you decide to take that first calm step toward your own version of that green line climbing.